This right here is the perfect metaphor for what we're about to do. This mouse right here, this Christmas mouse, here we are in this season, this December season where Christmas is upon us. But as you can see, if there were candy in here, this mouse will be pooping candy into this little Christmas present for all the good little boys and girls. Just like the bands on this list right here pooped and shat out horrible albums here in the calendar year 2013. That's right, it's the less improved and more worse top 10 worst albums of 2013 list here on the Cover Killer Nation channel, and there's even an honorable mention to bring the total up to 11. Oh, goody, goody gumdrops! So let's get started with the honorable mention and get this blasted show on the road, shall we? The first sinner, the honorable mention, the one that didn't quite make the cut. Tomorrow We Die Alive from Born of Osiris. After the discovery, I was really expecting great things from this band. And whenever I heard that they had a new album coming out in 2013, I instantaneously was very, very excited to hear it. And then I heard it, and I felt as though it was one of those situations where the discovery was such a huge step forward that perhaps this minor step back was one that just kind of had to happen. It was one thing where the evolutionary process for this band didn't exactly have it possible at all in the cards for them to actually make another killer directly after the success of the discovery. But this one was just kind of generic and bogged down. Every song had a similar flavor to it, and there was not a grandiose amount of diversity to it. This is an album that still, at face value, can be pretty decent if you really kind of look deep for it. But aside from that, it's just kind of mad. There's not much to it, and that's also why it didn't make the list. It was a disappointment, but as a bad album, not really. It just kind of was more so average, but a huge letdown. So now let's get into the actual list, shall we? Let's get to number 10 with Vengeance Falls by Trivium. Now, we all know that over the past couple of albums, my opinion of Trivium has not exactly been terrific. However, I've been willing to give them a chance with each passing album because I know in there that these guys are a really, really good band. And on this album, they employed the help of David Draymond, who's just everywhere this year in all the wrong ways. And it really didn't do them any favors to have him at the production helm. This is an album that's kind of ripe with just really, dull ideas that really didn't have very much of a value to them. There were a couple songs here and there that had a little bit better of a basis, but once again, this is another stinker from this band. Another one that I just can't get behind, another one that I just cannot, really see as being all that great. And the only thing that's been different about this one as compared to the past two is that, well, people are starting to see what I'm saying. And it's kind of starting to happen. And I don't know if it's just because of David Draymond at the production duty. I really don't think so. I don't think that has anything to do with it. But it is something where this one seems to be kind of blah. And I didn't like it that much. And it's definitely one of the worst that's in here in 2013. How about number 9? We have Hollywood Undead, Notes from the Underground. This one was from early in the year. We're talking January early, so this is one that's kind of festered for a little while. But you know what? The reason why it's so far down the list isn't because it's not as terrible as the ones that are above it. It's actually because of the relevance of these guys. The relevance of these guys is pretty much gone. It's over with. If you hear people still talking about Hollywood Undead, you should, consider them some sort of relic at this point. Hollywood Undead was one of those groups that had a bunch of fans for about a year, maybe 2 at the most, and then that was about it. They were a trendy little project that all of a sudden, now that they've been making a couple different albums that sound exactly the same, with the same boring modicum of, tools and tricks, people are starting to get a little bit wiser to it. Sure, there's still people that really enjoy these guys, and hey, to each their own. But for me, this album was one that was just soured by the fact that there was no evolution whatsoever. There was nothing on here that even remotely, spotted me as catchy. And for a guy who was thinking that maybe he would go into an album like this and actually, have his head turned and be a little bit surprised, that didn't happen. This one was crap. Number 8, we have Megadeth's Super Collider. Yeah, you knew this was probably going to be on here simply because it was a bit of a disappointment. It was a letdown, I had a lot of great expectations for this album, considering the singles were not that bad off of it. And, 13 was actually an album that I dug a lot. So, really, a step in the evolutionary process, from there would actually have boasted that Super Collider was going to be fantastic. David Draymond was on this album. It's the second time we've already mentioned him on this list, which is just ridiculous. And overall, the problem that this album suffered from is not so much that the songwriting is, completely and totally poor. It's the fact that it's become a little bit more overly simplistic. There's a little bit of ideas here that, it feels like Dave kind of just clustered these ideas together a little bit. And probably more often than not, the principal problem is that this just didn't feel like it was up to Megadeth standards. This is definitely one that felt like it was completely and totally just bogged down with some ridiculosity to it. This is one of those ones that was also very, very hard for me to put in the list. This was one that I almost made the honorable mention, but instead opted to throw it on the list because, well, for the very first time, this is an album that I listened to a couple of times, did the review of it, and only listened to it once again, probably about a week or so ago, and actually my opinion of it probably has become worse ever since then. I think I was a little bit nicer on the review than I really could have been, but there you go. This is an album that was a dud by one of my favorite bands of all time. It was bound to happen, and it happened this year with Super Collider by Megadeth coming in at number 8. How about number 7? Oh boy. Black Veil Brides. Wretched and Divine, the story of the Wild Ones, or whatever the fuck it's called. Who gives a shit? The Black Veil Brides to me are a band that are they're a group that is poisoned by their own selves. They have a guitar player that actually has some decent licks, but he's kind of doomed to genericness, if you really want to use that term that way. They have a look that's supposed to somehow harken back to days of Motley Crue in the 1980s, but the 1980s called and they really don't want a revival unless it involves them. They all have egos, you idiots. They wear some face paint, no one gives a shit, you're not a black metal band, you're not Kiss, you're nothing special, and this album kind of proves it. Like I said, there are some positives to this band. Their guitar player does have some licks, he does have some chops, and idea-wise, they certainly seem to be on the right track. However, they are not crossed over onto the right track, they are still on the wrong track. And not to mention, whenever you add on to the fact that they themselves are already becoming bigger than their britches, bigger than their heads really should be, yeah, this is a recipe for disaster. This album is a nightmare to try to get through. It's extremely difficult to even get halfway through it, and if you make it any further than that, you're either criminally insane, 13 years old, or a moron. It's one of the three. Take your fuck pick. Let's move on. Number 6, Asking Alexandria, From Death to Destiny. I had a lot of people tell me that they like this album. I have a lot of people that tell me that they like this band. And you know what? I gave these guys yet another try. I think I did a band review of them that was not very pleasant, so I figured, why not? One thing I'm really getting sick and tired of people doing is saying, why do you review something if you don't like it? Well, it's because I give bands a damn chance. I give them the opportunity to shine for me and potentially take me from one side of the argument to the other. Just because it doesn't seem to happen all that often just means that your little band that you love hasn't done that. They haven't swayed me because they still blow. And this is a terrific example of that. Asking Alexandria had a great amount of potential to maybe do something right with this album, but instead faltered. And that is all that really needs to be stated about it. They faltered, they reverted, and it stunk, just like the other two in their catalog have. If you like this band, good for you. Fuck you too. Number 5, Five Finger Death Punch, The Wrong Side of Heaven and the Righteous Side of Hell, Parts 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5, 7, 12, however many more of these they make. They shouldn't have made the second one because the second one just sounds like the first one. And hell, they shouldn't have made the first one because the first one sounds like shit. Now, you would think having a couple of great guests on board, such as Rob Halford of Judas Priest, that this would be something that would be an unsung hero, a great topic of discussion as far as celebration is concerned. Hell, you'd think this would be on the top 25 list of positives. Nope, no such luck. Instead, this is boring and filled with just generic radio-friendly rock metal, modern metal, that basically overemphasizes any four-letter word that you can think of, and maybe a couple of other different ones that could fall in the explicit department. The lyric writing is atrocious. All these songs are going to be ones that all the fans of this band will be using to describe their life. Who gives a fuck? Expand your horizons. If you thought part 2 was better than part 1, who are you? Stupid. And if you thought part 1 was any good at all, wow. These were a duality of double sin. We saw with Stone Sour, with the House of Golden Bones, a duality of greatness. We saw with Coheed and Cambria as the Afterman, a duality that went well for the first part, but then the second part just kind of lingered a little bit and just kind of was out there in midair and didn't really do much one way or the other. And now we have one that's the furthest of the extremes, the one that sucked on both levels. Let's move on. Number 4, Attila, About That Life. I didn't even review this. I made up a character to review this because I didn't even want to touch this. There was no amount of CKN rage that was actually going to give this album the proper justice that it really deserved whenever it came to how shit it was. The Limp Bizkit of metal we all thought was immure, but Attila's doing everything in their power to become the Limp Bizkit of deathcore. And this is just atrocious. I mean, I understand attempting to blend popular culture along with heavy metal. You know, the elements of swag, the elements of rap, and all these little hip-hop elements, and blah, 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 blah. Even look at the goddamn album cover. It doesn't even look like a fucking metal album cover. And whenever you listen to the damn album, it's filled with these little efforts that people are going to be using for Facebook, like, you know, leave a message, and now I'm reverting to the character, and blah, blah, blah. Fuck the haters. Fuck you. I'm going to be a hater, just like you're going to be a hater of me. So, guess what? We're mutually fucking each other somehow, which is really, really awkward. But yeah, this album was a piece of shit. If you enjoyed this record, then I suggest that maybe you go to the nearest bridge and contemplate jumping off. Whenever you decide not to because you realize that this whole thing was said in jest, well, just play in traffic for a little while and a car will do the rest for you. Number 3, Bullet for My Valentine, Temper Temper. I've had a lot of people say that this was their frontrunner for number 1, and wow. Number 3, pretty damn close, but not quite. For all the individuals that were really excited about Bullet for My Valentine coming out with a new record, man, was this a slap in the face. I heard a lot of different opinions saying that this album was the biggest pile of balls that they heard in a long time from a band that they once revered and once thought was going to be one of the future greats of the genre. You consider and contemplate their first 2 albums, and even to the lesser extent for some people, at least their 3rd album, and you would think that these guys had a real promising and lucrative endeavor coming up their way with Temper Temper. But instead, Temper Temper took things down to a demeaning low, principally because they opted to rehash ideas, they opted to recycle tired riffs, and they opted to basically take the laziest approach to songwriting humanly possible for a Bullet for My Valentine album. And the result was a huge piece of shit that ended up as number 3 on this list. Not to mention, the album was so damn bad it killed Box Me. So yeah, they're number 1 on my shit list just for that. Because he was a friend of mine. He was an important friend to us all. Not to mention, his opinion and his boxy voice, they're missed by all of us. Bastards. Killed a box. Number 2, Device is self-titled. Good God, the amount of rage that I showcased whenever this piece of fuck came out. Once again, it's another one of these albums, similarly to the first Five Finger Death Punch release of the year, that had more to come and a huge, huge, huge troupe of guest hosts and guest singers and players that they could really play off of, and it only worked in choice occasions. Serge Tankian should have been the singer of this project because he would have made it infinitely more interesting. And really, it could have been infinitely more interesting if it was just a damn instrumental project, for fuck's sake. Jesus Christ, how bland do you have to be inside David Draymond to speak with all caps and make music that literally makes me want to go to sleep? Industrial heavy music that makes me want to go to sleep? The fuck is this? Lullaby metal? Yeah, that's how bad this shit was. And Close My Eyes Forever, while it wasn't that bad of an attempt, and while it did prove, and I stated this in the review, it did prove that you have a range, you the fuck lies it, man, because you ain't using it enough, and it's really, really hindering you. Read my lips. Who gives a shit what they expect you to do? Who gives a fuck what they like? Utilize what you have, and you'll make something that's worth more to a wider audience than just 15 to 25-year-olds that want something that they can bang their chest to like they're King Fuck Kong and want to break shit. And the caps lock key is on the left, just so you know. Number 1, this should be almost trivial. I don't need this. Get this shit out of here. I don't even want to call it by its real name. That's how bad this is. Frequency Unknown by not Queensryche. No, not Queensryche. Not even Jeff Tate's Queensryche. This is Fakesryche. That's right. This ain't the real Queensryche, regardless to the way in which the courts order things around. This is fake-Ryche. Jeff Tate is a monumental, colossal, bald-headed idiot that also doubles as an asshole. His wife could basically go fuck herself, and they have children. Good for them. Merry Christmas, you spawned. The world collectively says, cut it off. Cut off the penis. Cut off the penis and cut off the vocal cords. Cut off the brainstem. This album was amazingly atrocious. I couldn't believe it. I can't believe that I've been doing these lists for 3 years. For 3 years, since 2011. And for the second year out of those 3, I'm talking about a Queensryche album, or at least one that bears the name, fake-Ryche or not, as the worst album of the year. It happened with Dedicated to Chaos in 2011, and it's happening here again in 2013. I can't believe it, but this proves the point that was made back then. Jeff Tate is clearly the motherfucking problem. Jeff Tate rushed this album out. That could be enough of an excuse for some people for why this album is lackluster. He rushed it out. He wanted to make sure his version was out first, as opposed to the other members of Queensryche with Todd La Torre whenever they released their album, simply entitled Queensryche. However, just because he rushed it out doesn't mean that you have to rush out the material and actually believe it's going to be halfway decent. Actually believe that people are going to give 2 fucks and like it and enjoy it just because Jeff Tate is on it. I am Jeff Tate. People shall worship my music and my penis simply based around my name and who I am and the songs that I performed on in the 1980s and early 1990s. Everything I've ever done has been incredible. Collabs, solo albums, Queensryche. That was me the whole time. There was no other members of that band. I cloned myself, motherfuckers. There were 5 Jeff Tates, and we all collectively were incredible. No. The result of this was some of the most boring, bland, wuss-puss rock I had heard this side of Chinese democracy from Guns and Fuck Roses. This album was so bad it needed remixed and re-released after a week, and not to mention it was so atrocious that they actually had a contest for who could bash it the most that I couldn't enter because I took pot shots. Yeah, that's right, I got personal, because that's what we do on this channel. This channel doesn't just focus 100% on the music, it also, when necessary, takes the steps required in order to make sure that individuals know that their bullshit won't be tolerated, that it will not stand, and that we hold you to a higher level of expectation, and that we hold our money to something of a higher value than pissing it away on this poor excuse of a fucking album. Jeff Tate, have mercy on us all and retire from music and take up fucking knitting. You can fuck up knitting and I won't talk about it. I won't, I promise. You are the second worst individual on this earth right now, and you're lucky. You should thank Ian Watkins. You should suck his cock in jail for making sure you don't have the #1 spot on that list. Shit. This list is over. Thank God. Hopefully 2014 is better. 2013 also had a myriad of great releases, and we are going to get to that next. So stay tuned, and may the shit be with you, because this shit just hit the fan.